Hey guys, it's me, Kim. This is another episode of the podcast. This is where I work through the issues that are pressing on my mind and take some time to chat with people who I think are brilliant and talented and knowledgeable. For this episode, I'm talking to Raquel Martin. She's a psychotherapist and co-host of the Black Unconscious podcast. I talked to Raquel about Black folks and mental health care, always an important and exciting topic, how we talk about therapy and mental health care in popular culture and how it's depicted in popular media, and I got to learn more about her work. It was super fascinating. It was a great conversation. Listen up. So again, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me, Raquel. I'm super into the Black Unconscious podcast. I have no idea how I came across it, but that's just what happens when you're on the internet all the time.
Yes, that's amazing. I'm so glad that you like it. I absolutely love doing it. It's like the most fun thing to do all week.
Okay, so I feel like therapy is having a moment right now, particularly among Black people. I feel like there is a real robust Black mental health conversation happening right now.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's about time, right? Like,
Yeah. I mean, it's so interesting, and it's coming from so many different areas. You have Charlemagne, and I see it on Insecure, and there's therapy for Black girls. How do you think we got here?
honestly, I think one of the things that started it was just the fact that when we're having this whole uprising of seeing all these traumatic things happening, a lot of people were reaching out to find clinicians. And then there was just a big burst of us figuring out that everyone was asking, where are the Black clinicians? Therapy for Black girls, I think, spearheaded a huge aspect of it with Dr. Joy. Dr. Joy, with her talking about the fact that she didn't think there was a space for finding just Black clinicians, because it's a pretty normal complaint, feeling like you want to work with someone who looks like you. And I think on my first episode, I said, I kind of wanted to find a clinician that I think at one point in time heard the Black Album. Like, I just really wanted to relate on that level as well. So I think we've been going through a lot as a community, and we've been thriving, going like natural, eating better, treating ourselves better, using crystals, doing all that. And, we're looking at it physically, but I think we're also looking at the inside aspect of it. And that's the big thing that we're missing. So I think us as a community are just thriving, becoming our best selves, period. And I think it's just our time. It should have been our time, but I think it's great that it's becoming just a movement with it. And I'm really appreciating being a part of it.
Do you think the internet has anything to do with it?
Oh my God, yes. I think the internet it's spearheaded everything. Honestly, websites like yours that give voice to the Black feminist movement and talking about everything that we're thinking about, but don't really get to see it unless we have to search everywhere, and we can't really talk about it in our offices because no one looks like us. I think the internet is a huge aspect of it. I don't know where I would be without being able to find clinicians online for just mental health, or even find mentoring opportunities for other professionals who are doing what I'm doing, and finding a mentor myself, or seeing what the issues are. When we talk about our topics, we kind of try to find what's being talked about recently, where are we struggling. When we're talking about trauma, it's normally after another murder or something like that has happened. When we're talking about the way relationships, it's normally after we've seen Insecure and we're seeing everyone talk about issues with that. The internet has helped us tremendously.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned Insecure. I love Insecure. I think it has issues, but I love it. One thing I really liked, I don't want to get into the issues, but one thing that I really liked was how they integrated a therapist into Molly's storyline. And I was listening to you guys kind of talk about it and some of the issues with Molly, hiding things from her therapist. I wonder,
yeah,
as a therapist, when you see it depicted on TV, particularly when it's a Black person, how do you feel? Are you that's wrong? How are you deconstructing it, or how do you consume images of therapy on TV as a therapist?
I honestly deconstruct every single aspect of therapy that I see on television, on Insecure, and also on She's Gotta Have It. I don't know if you've seen that, but I
Oh,
deconstructed
yeah.
that one too. Like the one aspect where she couldn't pay, so she started like painting things for her clinician, and I'm like, what kind of madness is this? Um, but also the fact that like Molly, before she had this one aspect where she was like pushing back against her therapist. Like she was talking to Issa and she was like, she acting like she know me just because she's black. Like you don't just know me because of that. And it's because she kind of hit a sore spot with her, right? Like she's not used to people questioning her and challenging her and being trained to kind of bypass her avoidance because she does a lot of avoidance in the session. And the therapist kind of rocks with it, but then she goes right back to the question of like, yeah, so as what we were talking about, let's get back to that. Like you're not going to just bypass the question that I asked you. And that's like a big resistance process anyway. Like it's a big thing for minorities to go see mental health clinicians. It's amazing if you can find one that looks like you, but also being called on your stuff most of the time. Like you can identify like the external locus of control, some things that affected you, but it's really hard. And you get a lot of resistance from patients when they have to realize like some of the stuff that has happening to you is a result of things that you have done. Like it's not just because
Mm-hmm.
things are happening to you. Like there's trauma in our community. There's things that are holding us back, but some things are things that you have done. And that's when Molly was kind of pushing back. And the fact that she had been seeing this clinician and did not tell her about Jerome, I was like, are you insane? Are you serious?
Yeah.
When she said, oh, who is Jerome? And then she just let Jerome slip. Like if she never mentioned that, she would have never
Yeah.
known. That's such a big aspect of her life that the minute she finds out that her dad cheated on her mom, she is with a married man. Like, come on. How am I supposed to
Mm-hmm.
help
Mm-hmm.
you? How are we supposed to work on the way that
Yeah.
you maneuver relationships when we're not talking about your most salient relationship that was severed for you when it comes to finding out about your dad, and in the way that you transition into a new relationship that can never fully be a real relationship, but you think it's okay?
Mm-hmm. I thought that was so interesting. You mentioned avoidance. What is avoidance?
Avoidance is the way we get out of processing things and the way that we get out of dealing with the issue. It's kind of like ducking and dodging. I think of it as like a swing and a miss. Like it's like, oh, I'm just going to dodge this question. It would be like if I asked you like some kind of intimate question about like how you're processing it. And sometimes the mind isn't ready, right? Like we delve into a lot of different topics and you may think you're ready to address it, but you're not because it makes you challenge that. It's called cognitive dissonance. It makes you challenge the fact that sometimes the way that you're living is not aligning with your values. And when you have that, you may avoid the issue. So you may change the subject. You may give like a really superficial answer. You may get defensive and ask why someone is asking you that. Like it's really the mind and the body's way of protecting you from having to challenge what you've done. Because it's kind of like, say like you smoke cigarettes, right? And you're also a health nut. So you're like, oh, I only smoke them on Fridays and Saturdays. And I only smoke organic. And your mind is doing that to protect you from the fact that like you eat organic food, you're vegan, you do yoga, and you still smoke cigarettes. You're avoiding the issue because you're not really prepared to challenge the fact that you identify as being a healthy person, but you're still smoking cigarettes. So it doesn't match. So your mind and your body protects you by like avoiding it. And a lot of times it happens in therapy by providing like superficial responses or saying, I don't know. And when a patient tells me that they don't know, I'm like,
Mm.
well, how does it feel to not know? Because I'm asking you something really serious that's going on with your life, and you're saying you don't understand or you don't know. Well, let's take some time to process it because I think this is really important to your progress.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, as a therapy goer, this feels very familiar. I
Yeah.
feel like I know what my therapist is trying to do now. Um, okay. So, what conversations one of the things that I really enjoy about your podcast is it's the intersection of mental health and identity and blackness and all of these things. I'm really interested in what kind of conversations should Black folks in particular be having about our mental health and be having about mental health care.
I think one of the biggest things that needs to be discussed is the mental health of our children. So I work with children, adolescents, and I also do family and groups. And I'm working with these children, and I work with minority children primarily, and seeing the effects that the trauma is having on the identity development of our youth is staggering. And basically, the way that they identify with their own blackness, the way they may refuse their blackness or may not get educated about it properly, and that really challenges the way you develop as an adult. Like if I, as a Black woman, was never told about I was never told about it in school, but of like bell hooks or, Angela Davis or Asasa Shakur, like any of that. I heard that from my mother. I never heard it from school. So we're having these things, and I wasn't really that much into media because I'm from North Philly, so we only had one TV. So the only exposures I got when it came to
Everybody in North Philly has one TV. Okay. Sorry. Okay. Sorry.
yeah. Well, just because it is North Philly and like it's a certain demographic there, so it's like we're not spending money on TVs. We got to pay bills. So it was just the aspect that like I got a really positive Black female, and African American education from my mother, but I never got that in school. And I never really was exposed to how some of our youth are exposed to like all of these negative media when it comes to seeing Black women fighting Black women or having seeing people that look like you getting shot on TV and looking at how that affects children negatively. So I feel like in one aspect we're seeing so many children and they're being identified as having behavioral disorders or like these aggressive disorders. And when I'm working with the children, it's not that. I'm actually seeing more like anxiety and depression, and I'm seeing like PTSD in these children. And I think it's because a lot of us don't identify or not well versed in what trauma is. Like a lot of people think that PTSD is a result of being in war. And we're talking to a family about the fact that I think their child has PTSD, and they're like, my child is 16. And then we talked about their history with the fact that they have seen 2 major relatives be murdered in front of them. The fact that they had someone their age that was a cousin be arrested. The fact that they feel like they have to be aggressive in every single sense, walking from home to school to survive. The fact that they have to be on guard, that they're hypervigilant, that they have issues sleeping. That's PTSD. Now, some people get it from war. Yeah, veterans get it from war. But the environment that some of these children are growing up in is a war zone. So I feel like in schools and things like that, children are manifesting aggressive behaviors, but it's not because they're naturally aggressive. That is not what's in our community. It's because they have to be defensive to survive, and they're fearful. So I feel like it starts with the children. And also we talked about we did an episode recently, we're talking about the way the people identify in relationships. And your most salient relationship is your relationship with your parent or your caregiver, because some people weren't reared by their mom or dad. It could be a grandparent or an aunt. And you have this attachment style. You can have a secure or an insecure attachment style. And that's how you integrate with any other relationship in your life, whether it's like a friend or another family member or a relationship. It's based off of this attachment style, which comes from having a secure base as a child, feeling like you can venture out, but you come back and you're safe. And when you think about it, a lot of people don't have that. So it's hard for them to build relationships with others. And when you keep getting shut down, you may pull back or you may act aggressively. And it all comes from that parental relationship or that most salient relationship. So what I'm finding is that while working with children, and the reason why I like working with children so much is that I can help the parent build a more secure base for them so they can understand that when they come home, they're safe, but they can also be themselves. They can also express themselves emotionally. Because as a community, that's something we struggle with. And I feel like a lot of my friends will be dating people, and they're like, this man does not know how to express his feelings. And I'm like, well, when has he ever been told that it's okay? Like, have you met his family? Have you met his siblings? Does it seem like that he's okay with expressing emotions to his mom? So imagine how hard it is to express his emotions to you. Like, it's kind of like we kind of got to think about where they come from. And it's not just men, it's men and women, but primarily like in research, because I do research on minority health disparities, and a lot of times we're looking at diagnosis disparities. The reason why a lot of children are diagnosed incorrectly is because they're not being seen by minority clinicians who understand what trauma and minority look like. So they give them some kind of aggressive disorder, which like stigmatizes them. And also because they display their emotions differently. Like they don't really, the same way grown men have difficulty expressing anything other than anger. And anger is a pretty easy emotion to express. You know, expressing guilt and shame and sadness, that is difficult. The anger, that's right at the top. Like they get that in the beginning. So it's hard for some clinicians who don't get it to diagnose anxiety disorder where you feel like the kid's just lashing out, or expressing depression where you feel like the kid is just like withdrawing and he's being insubordinate. And it's like, that kid's depressed. So I feel like it starts with the kid. It starts with the child. And I feel like when you're working with a child, you're going to work with the whole family, and we're able to manifest progress to the entire family. Like it's an entire generational thing. So I feel like we need to focus more on children. And I really feel like we need to focus on the way we express ourselves emotionally, because I think a lot of us are stagnant. We're not identifying that we're not living according to our values, and it's causing issues in every single aspect of our life. Like we're in a relationship that doesn't really work out well for you, but you don't want to be alone. So you don't understand why things are kind of spilling over. And it's because you're not living according to the values that you feel like really work with you, but you don't want to lose this person.
Yeah.
So it's just
gosh.
really hard.
There's so much here. Okay. So, when you were talking about children, that kind of reminded me, I feel like I've seen a couple of different articles, different places, one about the climbing suicide rate for Black children. Is that a thing?
Yeah, and you know what? I would have to read it because sometimes, so someone who does research, sometimes it's a climbing rate, and sometimes it's the first time people actually cared about that population to look into it.
Okay.
Which sounds awful, but it's like, sometimes it's like, oh, this rate is really, really high. It's rising, but it's like, oh, I have a time point from 2010 to 2016, like 2 time points, which is a 6-year. So it's like, it looks like a huge gap, but it may have been a steady rise. And it's because a lot of people don't look into minority health. Like, luckily, there's so many amazing minority researchers that are more invested in this. But I'd have to look at the research because there's a lot of gaps in research with minorities. We as the people are notorious for not really participating in research, which is why I always encourage people to do it, because we're trying to come up with all these cultural-based therapeutic techniques. And if you don't participate, we can't really tailor it to you. So it's really hard to know unless I look at it. But I do know that the whole that we don't commit suicide thing is a definite myth. I see more anxiety and depressed-ridden young males and females like every single day at Hopkins. And it's every time I hear like, oh, we don't get depressed. I'm like, I have at least 15 depressed young men and women on my caseload a week.
Yeah. I cannot even imagine somebody saying that Black people don't get depressed in 2018. I definitely heard it maybe 15 years ago, 10 years ago, but like, I feel like now we're more exposed, like I talked about earlier, or maybe that's just the conversations that I'm plugged into. Like, I feel like I see, even in like popular music, the music the kids listen to, the artists are like, all my friends are dead. Like Lil Uzi.
Oh my God. I heard my brother listen to that song. I was like, what in the devil is this? Like, it's there. It is more plugged into the music, but it's not like a lot of them are dealing with it. They keep talking about by drugs.
Yeah.
And that kind of freaks me out, because that isn't really, like, when I'm dealing with a child with a substance use disorder, you have to ask a bunch of questions. Like, so there's a lot of reasons. I feel like you can't treat the substance use disorder until I identify the reason why you use the drug. Is it because you want to feel the good, or stop feeling the bad? Because if I don't know why you're even using the drug, I can't even help you. But I do agree. I do feel like it's coming out more, but it's coming out like angrily with some people.
Yeah, I think self-medication is normalized now.
Yes, self-medication is normalized. Kid Cudi's been talking about his depression issues ever since the first album. Like, he's been significantly depressed as long as I've been listening to him. And Kanye West to a certain extent, but my heart can't take talking about him, to be honest. He's kind of broken me.
To a certain extent, but he did just say when he was at the White House that he does not actually have bipolar, that a new clinician said that he was just sleep deprived. So he's trying to separate himself from the mental health conversation now.
But did you hear the one time that when he said that he talked about like talking to therapists, and he was like, oh, and someone asked him like, how often do you see your therapist? And he said, oh, when I say therapist, I mean my friend.
Oh my God.
I'm not talking about I went to see someone. So like, I would have to see who he's talking about, because I would never forget reading that. And I was like, yeah, this is the problem.
That's interesting. Because how would you be prescribed if he said that he's like not taking his medication anymore? This devolved into a Kanye conversation. Sorry. But you would have to first speak to somebody before they prescribe you medication, no?
Yes, but one, he's a celebrity. So there's that. They get a lot of leeway when it comes to things. Two, he could see a psychiatrist, or he can actually get medication from his primary care physician, who doesn't have to do like a full workup on his mental health. So, and a lot of times when you see a primary care physician, they may give you like a temporary medication to help you, because if you're really struggling, and then they'll recommend and tell you that you still have to see a psychiatrist or a mental health professional. So that doesn't mean that he'll follow up. And I always find celebrities get a lot of leeway with things. So, and primary care physicians they're not trained in the same way psychologists and psychiatrists are to see the issues. They're trying to help you in the moment, but like think about how much time you spend with your PCP versus your therapist, and think about how often you see them.
Yeah.
It's not even, your PCP wouldn't know what's going on with you. Like,
right.
Because that's not their job.
Also, I will say I love my primary care physician, but it seems sometimes that his knowledge of like niche issues is very cursory. Like sometimes I'll be like, are you Googling right now? Sometimes I'll be in the office and be like, are you on WebMD?
Oh yeah,
like,
they're
what's happening?
Googling. Like, nah, they're definitely Googling. If someone's working to a hospital and seeing professionals like step out for a second, they Googling.
Yeah. Okay. To move away from that a little bit, I am so fascinated by, you do a lot of research on children. I'm obsessed with this, I guess maybe because I have 5-year-old nieces and I just want them to be fine. Another thing that I have seen recently is like climbing rates of anxiety for children. Is that a thing?
That is a thing.
Okay.
That is a thing. A lot of anxiety and depressive disorders are the top 2 disorders, followed by substance use for adolescents. And I work primarily with 13 to 18 on that research study, climbing every single year.
Okay.
It's not going down.
Do we know why that is?
I mean, I hypothesize, just me, like not published or anything yet until I conduct more research. I think it's the one aspect is okay, so I think there's a difference between the way we look at internal versus external locus of control, like the things that we identify we can control ourselves versus the things we can't. I think we're going with a really big, like, external generation that really takes on the opinions and stuff of others more, and that's something you can't really control, and it's making them anxious. Also, a lot of the children that I'm working with, that I had a 7th grader complain about, like, his grades and how it's going to affect him in college. So I think they're kind of stressing them out to a certain extent when it comes to, we want them to go well in school, but we're not really giving them an avenue to be children as well. And I'm also a little, and this is just me, I'm a little sick of the technology with all these kids. It's a bit absurd.
Yeah.
It's driving me insane.
Yeah.
So I have a strict cell phone or phone policy and things like that. But think about when you were a child. Like, there was nothing wrong with being bored. If I didn't have a phone until, I could pay for my own bill. So that was like high school. So I read books, or I was challenged to think more about myself versus like my values and who I am as a person, and not really look at the whole superficial thing. And this is a real, like, what is it? External generation where they're focusing so much on looks and stuff like that, which is really limited. Like, you can't really control that, but you can control, like, your integrity. You can't control the amount of honesty you have. You can't control being, like, a pleasant person. If you look a certain way, you kind of just look a certain way to a certain extent. And if that's something you can't control, I feel like they start getting anxious and depressed versus focusing more on who you are as a person. I feel like there's not enough identity development, and especially within our community, I think it's been doing really well with us working on, like, Black Girls Code and coming in mentoring programs. But I think the anxiety is the fact that there's so much access to social media. There's so much peer pressure with things to see how you look, and no one's really talking about who these kids are as individuals. Like, oh, okay, your hair looks amazing. How's your spirit, though?
Yeah.
It doesn't really seem like you're a pleasant person, and you have friends, but I think it's just because you have the nicest things. What happens when no one cares about that?
Yeah.
How are you as a person?
Yeah. Okay. I'm so glad you said this. I always love when smart people reinforce ideas that I already have in my head. And I really believe that social media is such a danger to children. I had a phone when I was in middle school, but like, it was Nokia. We just played Snake. I mean, it was like, it wasn't
just like after you have Snake on your phone.
Yeah, like, that's like, it wasn't, I mean, and like, we maybe came home and like got on AOL Instant Messenger, but it wasn't ubiquitous, right? Like, I could get away from it. I could put it down. I could read. I could do other things. But at this point, I'm grown, right? Like, I'm almost 30. And I'm legitimately addicted to my phone and to the internet. but I'm grown, right? Like I'm a fully realized human. I
You're
cannot
paying your bills. You're the one
right.
plugged in. It's
Right.
on you.
And I've had time to figure out who I am and what I want to be in the world. And this is what my body looks like. And this is what my face looks like. And we're good. I cannot imagine being 12, 13, 14, black girl and being on Instagram all day or being on, I don't
No.
know, what other things. Kids don't really use Facebook, but like being on
Oh yeah, I got
Snapchat.
told Facebook was for old people the other
Yeah.
dark day. I was like, oh my god.
Yeah, yeah, they're like, no, that's for my grandma.
Yeah.
But like being on like consuming these images and these hyper they're so curated and they are photoshopped.
Sexualized.
Yeah, yeah, they're hypersexualized. They're curated so everything looks perfect and the colors are perfect and and it's like, how do you develop a sense of self when you are constantly consuming these images? I get really concerned. You know, I see my little nieces on their tablets and I'm like, oh my God, get off YouTube.
I think it's also the fact that so like we have a pleasure zone in our brain, like the dopamine receptor and stuff like that. And a lot of these things, I think a lot of children, it takes so much more to engage them because they're so used to technology. So say we have to read books. I loved books. I think books are amazing. I can come up with my own imagination. You have to come up with characters and stuff like that. But I think that's limiting for some kids because they're so used to having like movies where you don't really have to think about anything. You just sit there and watch. Or like even Instagram and Snapchat, you don't get the full story. You get a 1-minute video or you get like a 15-minute story or even Snapchat, like it's even shorter. Like you can't even hold their engagement. And it's kind of like it's a cheap trick, right? Like it takes nothing to look at a picture like it and look at someone's little caption. It takes more to take a minute and like critically think. Use your brain and read a book and actually think about like the characters and stuff like that. So I think it's also the fact that they're so used to instant gratification that it's easier for them to look at and focus on someone else than themselves. And with social media, like if there were issues with bullying, when you went home, you weren't bullied. When you're now, bullies are everywhere. Like if you're not on getting text messages, you're getting group me's. If you're not getting group me's, you're getting Snapchats. If you're not getting Snapchats, you're getting Instagram. If you're not getting that, so by the time that passed, you're seeing them at school. Like these bullies are like it is vicious. The stuff I have heard, like things that like the way people guard against you, the way they do group me's and kick someone out, and then all of a sudden by lunchtime you have no friends and someone wants to fight you, and it's just like, oh my, like. Or the things that girls do for likes or boys do for likes, these videos that are them exposing themselves and realizing that follows them and that's going to sever their ties in the future with people just to get that instant gratification of someone that you don't know or someone that you do know like you, like something that you did that was inappropriate. I feel like one of the things is the instant gratification that this population needs, and they kind of need to chill out, read a book, and look at the trees. Like you can be bored for 2 seconds, and you don't even get to be bored. You have youth. There are so many things out there. You're not bored. You need to find something to do. You're not bored. Life is not boring. These videos, these Instagram, and like the think about like when you see the movie version of a book, it's never as good. It's never as good. It's just like they just don't get it.
I don't want to like sound like a person. Like I think that there are so many benefits to technology. Obviously, I've made my life and being on the internet all the time. And I think that they are learning different skills, but I also worry about the stuff that they're losing. I feel like that my attention span is gone. Like, I feel like it's difficult for me, and I still do a lot of reading, but I feel like when I was a kid, I could sit up in my grandma's house all day and read a book, and it was great, and I had a great time. I'm not sure if I today could do that. And I worry about kids even missing out on the opportunity to even develop that skill, just like sitting alone with your thoughts and having to converse with something, you know, that, like you said, that instant gratification, like being able to delay your pleasure, being able to delay the gratification. Like I just worry about like, what's the world going to be like when these people are in control in like 25 or 30 years?
Right? Because now these articles have this thing on the top where it tells you how many minutes of a read it is. So like
Yeah.
it'll be like 10-minute read or 5-minute read. So it's not, I don't think it's just kids, but it's also like you mentioned your website. Your website is different though. Your website, provides a perspective on like different aspects of like Black feminist thought and then talking about educated perspectives and giving voice to a lot of narratives. That's different than me being able to log in on like Gossip or something like that, which is where these kids are going. Like
Yeah.
I direct kids to more credible sites all the time, but they're over here going to darn like
Yeah.
Threads Hill or Gossip. Like that's the issue. It's like the resource of internet is amazing. Like the fact that I can find someone who's researching what I'm researching is amazing. But the problem is that children aren't really being directed to that because that doesn't entertain them as much. And honestly, at some point their brains just aren't there anyway. So because the brain doesn't really stop developing until you're 25. So in my opinion, you're not really adult until you're 26, and then you're barely an adult. So it's like they're not really at that point. But they're not looking at the websites that talk to you about, like, they're not on CNN. They're not,
Yeah.
like,
I'm not even sure if kids really go to websites. Like, I think that's like a different thing too. Now it's just like all on the social media platforms. Like if you can't consume it on Instagram or Snapchat or whatever, like I'm not even sure. You know what? This really brings up my nieces are 5. I love them. I'm obsessed with them. They are obsessed with technology, which, ups and downs, like there's pros and cons to that. And one time I was talking to my sister about, I saw that on this website. And my niece goes, "What's a website?" And I was like, oh my gosh. And it's like, these are kids who like are so proficient on their little tablets. They get on YouTube, they watch all the videos, they play like they understand. But she asked me, "What is a website?" And I was like, oh wow, like our understanding of even how the internet works, like our foundations are completely different.
Yeah, I remember being amazed by the internet when it was even a thing. I think the biggest push for this is like parents are going to have to put their foot down, and it's like technology is great, cool, you can have screen time, let's also have some book time. And I think another way that pushes children more is that one of the biggest recommendations I make for parents all the time is they're like, it's just to get involved in the stuff that the kids do. So, like, if you want your child to read a book, that's cool. You two can read a book together, read the same book, but then also be willing to play Fortnite with them for like 20 minutes. Because it's give and take. So I know it's boring. I know you don't want to do it, but the older kids get, the more you kind of have to court them a little bit. Like it's nothing wrong with trying to do stuff that they want to do, because they're pulling away a little bit. So if you want them to read a book with you, cool. Pick a cool book. Let them pick the book. You two read it together. But then be willing to watch whatever stupid video they have of the watching people play a video game. I don't know how many. I don't even know why that's a thing.
It's a huge thing, though. Like it's so popular. I'm so amazed by this. Yeah, that's a real thing.
I think it's all about mentors and like just like how you have your nieces, and like being like a prominent figure. Because if I didn't have like the amazing woman tribe that reared me, I wouldn't have looked out for the amazing tribe of goddess friends that I have right now. And it's because I understood that that's what my mom had. And they were amazing and supportive, and they were all doing different things. And that's what I wanted, to find people who like were like me, but also like challenged me to be like, oh, she's doing this, I need to do better.
Yeah.
I need to like improve.
Yeah. I've definitely recognized the importance of modeling, modeling what good behaviors
modeling
are for
is
my
everything.
Kids.
Oh my God. Look at you. That's a psych word. Modeling is everything.
Listen, I'm therapized. Okay. Like I go to therapy. I am there.
Modeling is everything. When people come in with their child and they're like, oh, she has an attitude. And then I'm like, cool. You guys seem really similar though. I don't know how to approach this. She's like, but I'm an adult. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Well, let's work on this.
Yeah.
You want your child to be a mini you until they get to the part where they over here talking back and telling you about yourself. And that's when you're like, hey, you can't talk to me like that. I'm an adult. Modeling is everything. That's the thing. And these kids are modeling, and that people aren't really modeling solely their amazing caregivers. They're modeling these rappers who are talking about substance use and stuff like that. It's all about modeling.
Yeah.
Look at that, man. That's what it is. That's right. You are therapized. Look at you.
Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to talk about is you mentioned that you have some doubts about the way that we talk about self-care and the way that it's deployed like in popular conversations about mental health and mental health care. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Okay, so with psychology and mental health being so popular, it's amazing. It's great that we're getting out this aspect of it. But, with things becoming more popular, there's also people talking about things that they don't know. And I just think the issue is sometimes, so self-care, I think sometimes self-care can be seen as like an indulgent thing. Like, oh, okay, I decided to, I don't know, go to the mall today. That was my self-care, which is great if that's like something that you can afford. But I think it really alienates people who can't afford that aspect of it. And really self-care is just them having 15 minutes alone without hearing like their kids scream at them, or just being able to think about how they felt that day or process like what's going on with them. So I think sometimes self-care can just come off as too indulgent when self-care is just really simple. It could just be as simple as like unplugging. Like the same way, like anytime one of our devices messes up and we like unplug it for like 20 minutes and then turn it back on and it works. It's the same for people. Unplug for like 20 minutes and see if you don't like reset, because we live like really abbreviated lives, right? Like we text message instead of talking on the phone. We email. We don't really have like conference calls in person anymore. We heat up food in the microwave. We have like such abbreviated interactions that we never really give like difficult things or happy things the space that they deserve to like process them. And I think sometimes self-care is just that. It can just be me having 15 minutes in my car before I go into my apartment and have to like deal with like whatever chores I have to do at home, to think about like how my day went and how I really reacted to that. And I just think it doesn't have to be as indulgent as some people make it out to be. It really doesn't have to be like treating yourself to anything big. It can really just be, I don't know, treating yourself to yourself. Like being mindful of like how you were in the day. Because when you think about it, when you talk to people, you don't really get a chance to process your day. You have so many things going on. You have work, you have school, you have, chores, you have just trying to manage everything. And think about how much time you actually thought to take the time to think about what happened that day. How did I feel as a reaction to this? This person cut me off. How did that change my whole day? I had a bad day. Did you really have a bad day, or did you have a bad moment and you made it into a bad day? Like just realizing that. And when you take the time to process it, I think you're more able to not make those mistakes again. I used to have a very bad habit of making a moment a bad day, making a bad traffic, like someone cut me off, a bad day. And when I sat back to think about it, it was like, I only had like a bad 10 minutes. What the freak was my problem the whole day? I was just like a butt for the whole day. And there was really no reason for it. And it's because we're not really giving ourselves the space. So like self-care can be indulgent. It can be a massage. It can be like going out for meals and stuff like that. It can be hanging out with your friends out, but it can also be just take some time to yourself and focus on you and not be so abbreviated in those motions. And I know so many people say that they don't really have the time in the day, but you're not going to tell them you don't have 10 minutes. Because we all scroll for at least 30 minutes online. You have 10 minutes to sit here and think about how you went about your day, how you reacted to those things, and actually think about how they affected you, period. And I think there's nothing more self-care like therapy. I'm a little biased because I've been, dedicated my whole entire life to it, but there's no relationship like that with a clinician. It's one of the few relationships that doesn't have to be reciprocal, where you don't have to, it's not like a give and take. My job is just to be there for you and your family and your child. Like that's my entire job. That's what my whole training is here for you. You don't have to ask me about my day. That's not your job. My job is to be here for you. You won't have any relationship like that. Not a good one, where you don't care about the other person, like seeing what's going on with them. There's nothing more like amazing than a therapeutic relationship with a good clinician, because you'll never get that ever, where you don't have to think about if you were a friend and you were just like, this is all my issues. These are all my issues. And that's it. And I'm done. Like, how many times are you actually going to call that friend? You're not. That's why therapy is so amazing. That's why we get trained in it.
Yeah, that's why you can't just be talking about my friends or my therapists.
No, my friends are my friends. Because honestly, my friends are not impartial. They're going to be on my side. I mean, they'll tell me stuff to a certain extent, but they're also not trained in realizing when I am avoiding or when I am withdrawing or challenging things. Like that's not what they're trained in. And they shouldn't be my clinician, because honestly, that's not the relationship I want with my friends. Sometimes I want you to tell me I'm amazing. And I did everything right, even when I shouldn't have, like, I don't know, slashed his tires or something crazy like that. Like, I don't need all that. Like, sometimes I just want a friend. And sometimes I want a trained professional who understands, like, what my anxiety or depression is looking like and how it manifests and how it's now negatively impacting my home, school, and work relationships. That's what I want. And my friends don't know that.
Yeah.
Like,
Okay, so that is all I have. Thank you so much for taking some time to talk to me.
Oh my
Where
God,
can
thank you.
people find you?
So we have the blackunconscious.com. We do podcasts every Thursday. We're on season 2. We just released an episode today about policing freedom, and we talk about everything from actual policing, from that aspect of it, also to policing your emotions and how you may not feel like you can express yourself in a free way, the same way that a non-minority peer may be able to. We have an Instagram at the Black Unconscious, a Twitter, BLK Unconscious. We also have a Facebook, Black Unconscious, and the website you can send us questions. We always want questions to ask, to answer. And we're doing all that. We're also going to be at the DC Podfest doing a diversity panel as well,
Oh, awesome.
which is really needed.
Yeah. I think, like I said, the intersection of the things that the topics that y'all are bringing together, it's so interesting and good. I'm obsessed with this time. I feel really fortunate to like be an adult in 2018 where I have access to so many smart Black people going really in depth about all the facets of Black life. I think that's so great.
Right? It is great. And me and Dr. Hopkins, me and Justin, we see things very different most of the time. Like, I'm so lucky to have like a Black male psychologist. I always call him a unicorn because there are like very few black male psychologists.
Yeah.
But like, we see stuff differently most of the time, and like, he's very serious and I'm more jokey because it's like, yes, we all know books and read and we're smart, but like, can we just kick it for a little bit? Like, let's just chill out.
Yeah.
and talk about this in a way that like most people can digest, and not, in the way that you can connect it to how you see it. Everyone can connect to like the aspect of our podcast because we're just talking like, this is the face behind the couch. Like, this is what your clinician will look like, just like us. Like, that's it.
Yeah, and I love the balance. Sometimes he'll go off into the super cerebral, heady stuff, and you'll be like, "Oh, that's a little sciencey." We're good, getting a little technical, but I love it. It's really good to hear the inner thoughts of like the people that you're divulging your inner thoughts to. So, thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh my God, I like love your website so much.
Well, that's all I have. Thank you guys so much for listening. Bye.